By the grace of God, we now have Professor Said Mohammed Marandi, who joins us from Tehran. Professor, you had us worried for a moment or two, but thanks to God, you're still with us, although so many of your compatriots have lost their lives and untold damage has been done by Israeli and American bombardment. But we're asking the question tonight on the poll, has Trump won his Iran war? What would your answer to that poll question be?
It's an utter failure. He promised a swift victory, and he actually said that he was surprised that the Iranians were striking at U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf. And that just shows how ignorant he and his advisors are, unless his advisors are lying to him so that he would pursue the war. That I don't know. But Iran obviously was going to strike back when the United States has bases across the Persian Gulf region, and these Arab family dictatorships, they facilitate aggression. Iran is going to strike back. And fortunately, Iran has hit back hard, and it has also been punishing the Israeli regime. And despite the censorship in occupied Palestine, the information that does come out is that the regime is being badly hammered. Yes, of course, Iran is also being hurt. It's fighting against the combined force of the global empire, the collective West, its regional proxies. Erdogan to the north is allowing NATO to gather information for the United States and Israel and the Israeli regime. Jordan provides airspace and bases, and all the countries in the Persian Gulf region, they are completely in line with US policy. So despite this enormous coalition, Iran is hitting back hard. The Americans have failed to take out its missile capabilities. It's failed to take out its missile production capabilities. It's failed to take out its drone capabilities and its drone production capabilities. And we see that Iran is hitting them day and night. So this is definitely a defeat. And now the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And that is going to create great difficulty for the global economy, but Western economies in particular. Yet they only have themselves to blame. Iran did not want this war. Iran did not start this war. Iran was negotiating like last time round. Iran was betrayed and attacked.
Well, we say you should have gone to Specsavers. In this case, they should have watched the mother of all talk shows, because everything you have just adumbrated as having happened, you warned would happen over and over again on this very show and elsewhere, I'm sure. There are reports this evening of a mini nuclear explosion in the town of Quds in Iran. Others say it was perhaps one of these Moabs that they dropped on a mountain in Afghanistan, you may recall, in Trump's last term. Anything you can tell us about that? It produced a mushroom cloud. It was unusually devastating in its impact and volume. Anything you can tell us about that?
I don't know any details about that. And I don't know what sort of munitions were used. But George, they are utterly barbaric. The American armed forces is no better than the Israeli regime. They failed against Iran on the battlefield. They have not been able to destroy the underground drone bases, the underground missile bases, the production lines, and that has frustrated them. So they've been bombing cities. They've been bombing hospitals. They bombed the Red Crescent Society, the main building, the national building. They bombed the National Emergency Service building. They've been bombing them across the country. They've bombing Iranian national radio and television multiple times, and the list goes on. It's nonstop. They're slaughtering kids. They're attacking apartment blocks, and they're slaughtering families. They're bombing truck drivers who are taking food and goods from one city to another. They bomb their trucks. I know a person whose brother had hired 2 truck drivers to take goods from one city to another, and they were both killed. I was just informed a few hours ago today. This is what the Trump regime is doing. They failed on the battlefield. They take their revenge on ordinary people. This is exactly the sort of mentality that Zionists have.
Now, you know that Donald Trump, perhaps in the lowest point of his presidency, at least so far, told the press conference that he gave in Mar-a-Lago, his palace of depravity in Florida, perhaps not depravity, vulgarity, I meant to say, as my friend John White put it in a great piece he's written this evening. His palace of vulgarity at Mar-a-Lago, he gave a press conference in which, with a straight face, he said that maybe Iran had fired the Tomahawk missile at these 175 little girls, and presumably, therefore, Iran had 2 Tomahawk missiles because there was a double tap. 40 minutes later, the parents and the teachers and the emergency workers desperately trying to rescue these little girls were hit identically in the same spot. This was too much even for the Washington prostitutes to bear, and so they pressed him, and he said he'd wait till the report was in. Well, the report is now in, and the United States is guilty of one of the greatest war crimes in history, taking account of the actual target, little girls. What's your response to that?
George, they've been carrying out double tap attacks for days now, day and night, in city after city, across Tehran, as they bomb places. And then when people go to rescue, to seek for survivors, when first responders arrive and are busy, they strike again. They've been doing this for the entire 12 days. But in Tehran, it's been happening across the city. Just one example. And there have been lots of massacres. There have been families that have been wiped out in Tehran, multiple families, and apartment blocks that have been totally destroyed. They've bombed vehicles, not just the trucks, but they've bombed ambulances. They strike. Their focus is on civilian infrastructure. As I said, they failed to stop the missiles. They failed to stop the drones. So they're trying to terrorize the Iranian people. And this is the regime that says that it wants to save the Iranian people. And this is the Western media that's been quiet, that's been lying about tens of thousands of peaceful protesters being gunned down on the streets. That was a lie so that they could do this. Western media is a part of this war. They are foot soldiers in this war against the Iranian people. And the images are coming out day and night, but you don't see them in the Western media. Just like you don't see the images from the funeral today, where huge numbers of people went to the streets of Tehran under missile fire and carried out the funeral. At nights, as right now tonight, across Tehran and in other cities, people are on the streets in different neighborhoods, huge crowds in support of the armed forces. You don't see this in the Western media. The Western media will simply repeat their lies that the Iranian people are desperate, the Iranian people want to regime change in order to justify death and destruction. Even those who pretend to be against the war, they promote this narrative to legitimize death and destruction and war. But the facts on the ground are clear. People support the Islamic Republic of Iran, even those who in the past, those young people who flirted with the rioters, who were on the streets when the terrorists were gunning down police officers and burning down clinics and mosques and schools and buses and fire trucks and ambulances. They were on the street. Those people, those young people have woken up to reality. They've now recognized what the United States really is, what the Israeli regime really is. I have 3 such examples among my own students, or at least students in my faculty, not necessarily my students, but who contacted me and said, how can we help? They wanted to make up for this, for what they felt that was the mistake that they made in the past. The country is united, but the West does not want people to know that. It has always been united, as we saw on the anniversary of the revolution, as we saw on January the 12th, after the riots, when people came to the streets to condemn the riots. But today it's even more united than that. But you won't have this acknowledged in the West. I was on the streets in a gathering a couple of days ago, a huge gathering, and they bombed Tehran, and hundreds of thousands of people were on the streets. Even though many people have left the city, the crowd was huge. No one budged, George. Men and women stood their ground. No one panicked. No one ran away. I've never seen such a scene in my life. Bomb after bomb after bomb fell, not far off from the gathering. Is this news in the West that the Americans and the Israelis are bombing nearby a major demonstration? There would be outrage in the West if it was anywhere else. But since they hate Iran so much, since they're so hostile towards the Iranian people, because Iran opposes genocide, Iran opposes apartheid, Iran opposes ethnic cleansing. That is Iran's sin. Iran's sin is that it supports the people of Gaza. It supports the people of Cuba that are being strangled as we speak. It supports the people of Venezuela. It supports the oppressed. It wants to be independent. That's what the revolution was about. And that is its sin. That is why it can be bombed. And the people who are steadfast on the streets supporting the armed forces and the state and the leader, they're erased from Western media. They are not acknowledged because that destroys the narrative. And the narrative is to bomb the city, to bomb the country, to destroy the infrastructure, to help the Israeli regime achieve its ultimate goal, which is the goal of the United States, as the U.S. ambassador to the Israeli regime pointed out, that it's fine for the Israeli regime to take the entire region. But yet, while Iran is struggling to beat back the empire, we see that Erdogan and Mohammed bin Zayed and Sisi and Abdullah II, and all of them are on the other side.
Now, there are objective measurements that we can take on who's winning the war. One is there is no American warship within 700 kilometers of Iran. The Straits of Hormuz, which Trump boasted he was going to open, he said American warships, which are nowhere near, would escort tankers, and this drove the price of oil down, reversed the fall in the share price, and of course that turned out to be another brazen lie. So these are objective measurements. Equally, it's objective to say that the Iranian ballistic and today hypersonic missiles are still battering the apartheid state night after night. In fact, day after day and night after night. If Iran was a beaten country, if Iran had effectively been nullified, neither of these objective facts I've just cited would be true, would they?
Absolutely. And they keep saying that Iran is running out of missiles, that it is running out of launchers, that every day we're seeing that the Iranians are striking the Israeli regime, they're striking U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf. Some in the West complain, and they've taken it to the Security Council, that why is Iran striking these regimes in the Persian Gulf? These regimes host U.S. bases. These regimes are complicit in conspiring against the Iranian people. These regimes have blood on their hands. They can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't conspire against the Iranian people and let the Americans bomb Iran and use their territory to launch missiles or use their airspace to fly over to attack Iran, to use bases in these countries, the radar systems and other facilities against Iran, and then pretend that they're neutral. Iran is definitely going to strike back. It doesn't matter what happens in the UN Security Council or anywhere else. Iran is going to strike back when aggression is carried out. And Iran is not going to accept a ceasefire, George. Iran has to have
I wanted to come on to that very point, Professor. It's just like the last time. It's the people who launched the war who now want to end it. Call it an off-ramp, call it a ceasefire, call it, well, we've got nothing left to bomb, we might as well go home, however they want to describe it. They are the ones asking for the ceasefire. It's in the fancy American newspapers, it's in the fancy Israeli newspapers, that this is not going well. And maybe we should call a halt for a time. But that's the point, isn't it? It's only for a time. Iran's being asked to agree to a ceasefire only for this all to be resumed in a year or 2 years from now.
Exactly. And Iran is not going to accept such a ceasefire. If there's going to be a halt in the fighting, Iran has to have assurances that these tiny Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, these utterly corrupt proxies of the United States, whether it's Qatar, the Emirates, or Kuwait, or Bahrain, they cannot be used against the Iranian people in the future. That's unacceptable for now. Also, Iran has to have assurances that the United States is not going to be able to attack Iran again. And Iran will demand full compensation for all the damages done. That is not something that Iran is going to relinquish. These are the reason why, George, we accepted a halt in hostilities during the 12-day war, because some people do criticize Iran for that, was because, true, we defeated the Israeli regime. They were the ones seeking for a ceasefire. But Iran saw its many flaws. It saw that it had to change a lot of things, because we ultimately knew that there was going to be a war. We knew that eventually the Trump regime or the regime in Washington is going to go to war with Iran. That's why Iran has been planning for 25 years. But during the 12-day war, Iran saw its strengths and its weaknesses, as we discussed before. So during the last 8 and 9 months, the Iranians have been working 24 hours a day to prepare itself for the big war. And they've been successful. The United States and the Israeli regime combined, and the bulk of the power is the United States, not the Israelis. Of course, the Israelis, whatever power they have, it's from the West. They're nothing. But this combined power with regional collaboration has been far less effective in destroying launchers, in destroying assets, key assets in Iran during the last 12 days compared to the other one. Why? Because the Iranians have prepared themselves. Through all sorts of means. The way in which they launch missiles, decoys, moving people around, moving key assets around. So the casualties are much less, the damage is much less, and Iran's firepower is much greater. So Iran made a smart move. It was winning. It decided that it should stop, swiftly prepare itself. And so that when what was inevitable, the inevitable aggression of the United States and the Israeli regime, the collective West and their regional proxies, when it happened, the Iranians were much better prepared. And today, George, Iran has the upper hand. It's painful. Children are being slaughtered. People are being murdered. The son-in-law of my sister, 3 of his friends were killed today. This is pain. This is painful for the nation. But we have no other option. This is a war for survival. And we have to fight this war. For the regime in Washington, this is a war of choice. And whatever happens, George, with the rise of the price of energy, which will continue because the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be opened. Until conditions are met, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed. The prices across the world will increase, but there's only the Zionists to blame, and they push the United States towards war. So the international community recognizes that Iran did not want war. We are doing trade. It was the United States and the Israeli regime that attacked us. So if the global economy goes down, no one can blame Iran. It is the United States and the Israeli regime. And if Iran is not accepting a ceasefire, it's because Iran knows that if they do just accept a ceasefire today, they will attack us again a few months later, just like they did last time.
I mean, I almost daren't ask you, but Witkoff says that he's trying to contact Mr. Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, to see if he wants to talk. This is the same Witkoff who blatantly lied to President Trump, or President Trump is blatantly lying about him, because Trump says that Witkoff told him the Iranian negotiators said, in a nutshell, we are going to continue making nuclear bombs, which we know to be a falsehood because that's not allowed in Iran, making nuclear bombs. No Iranian has ever said that they are going to and are continuing to try and make nuclear bombs. So this is the Witkoff that now wants to talk to you. What's your message to him?
George, Witkoff is a liar. And there are 2 reasons that I can give that prove he's lying. One is that, fortunately, there were no direct negotiations. So the Omani foreign minister was carrying back and forth the messages. What he said when he went to Washington during the negotiations and hours before the attack is completely different from what Witkoff is saying. The second issue is that Iran, as you rightly pointed out, Iran's religious decree and its official position, its government position has always been that we do not want nuclear weapons. So Iran will go and tell its enemy during negotiations that, yes, we want to pursue nuclear weapons. It would tell its enemy that, but not the international community. Doesn't make sense at all. It's a lie. And so it's only one of 2 things. Either Witkoff and Kushner lied to Trump because they're both Zionists, they're both ethno-supremacists. Either they lied to Trump to get him to launch the war, or Trump is lying. Both can be, or both. It's whatever it is, it's these 3 people: Witkoff, Kushner, Trump. Otherwise, the Iranian position has always been clear. And fortunately, because of the indirect negotiations, the Trump regime cannot hide the truth.
I think nobody believes them. Nobody believed Trump when he threw the Tomahawk story into the press conference the other night. I don't think anybody believes him when it comes to the negotiations. So they bombed you during the negotiations, and they bombed you the last time during the negotiations. So what circumstances might bring this to a halt? What about if somebody you trust, like President Putin, for example, were to seek to mediate a settlement of this matter? Would Iran be open to that?
I don't think that's the issue, George. I think the problem is that anything that the United States says is meaningless. Anything that the Israeli regime says is meaningless. They have already negotiated with us twice and secretly conspired to bomb us. So if a third party enters the fray like the Omanis or anyone else, what difference does it make? What can bring the war to an end is for real assurances. The facts on the ground have to change so that Iran sees that its security for the coming years and decades is assured. And Iran has to be compensated. Those countries that facilitated these attacks, those countries that carried out these attacks, someone has to pay. They're slaughtering families, entire families. They're slaughtering kids. They're maiming people. They're destroying the country's infrastructure. Someone has to pay. And Iran is not going to let them get away with this. And Iran has the military capability to put pressure on them to make them concede or give concessions to resolve the situation. So this is for the negotiation in the future for Iranian diplomats and security officials to deal with and figure out what the solution would be. But talking with Americans is useless. I don't think any government can talk with Americans and have any trust anymore, because they'll say one thing today and do something else tomorrow. And the media and the Western media, they're obedient. Even the media outlets that hate Trump, when it comes to Iran, they're in bed with the regime. It took 1 week for the New York Times to gradually come out and talk about these children who were slaughtered on day one. We all knew it. It was online. Everyone saw the footage. People were talking about it for an entire week. And then after a week, the New York Times comes out and says, maybe there's a problem. No one believes that they're serious journalists.
No, I mean, I asked because President Putin spoke with your president just this day on the telephone, and I wondered what that conversation might be about. That was all.
I don't know. I mean, there was the UN Security Council meeting today, which they put a resolution to condemn Iran, completely unjustified, and it's not going to change Iran's policy because it's clear as day. The US has bases in the Persian Gulf and it attacks Iran. If any country, if France provided Russia with bases, or if Canada provided the Chinese with bases, and they launch an attack on the United States, or the Russians launch an attack on the British, could Canada ever say that we are neutral? Could the French say we're neutral? It's meaningless. It's nonsense. But the West, they want to pretend that Iran is the aggressor. We were negotiating. Even if the negotiations had failed, they have no right to attack Iran. These are war crimes. These are crimes against humanity. They murdered our leader. They murdered commanders of our own forces. They murdered all these children. So even if the negotiations had failed, they had no right to attack us. But we were negotiating. And then they launched this attack, and it was facilitated by our neighbors. So they should have no expectation. They should be very thankful to Iran for showing restraint. Otherwise, if the Iranians didn't want to show restraint, they could take out all their infrastructure within hours. These tiny Arab family dictatorships only have oil or gas, and that's it. They're completely dependent. They don't even have water. They have desalination plants. So they're totally vulnerable. But the Iranians have been patient. They've been careful. And these regimes should be thankful. But Western media pretends that Iran is lashing out. No, Iran is defending itself against the empire.